Happy Mother's Day to my mother, who I love, on this day in May 2023. Please read to me from your childhood.
The front porch. As I sit here in my rocker, my mind wanders to times gone by. All around me are fields of tobacco which were planted by our last family farmer, just as it was when I was growing up, and also when my mother was a child. There is open land with large pecan trees which provide my grandmother with the main ingredient of her homemade pecan pies. She and my mother were the best southern cooks I know. I would have to include my aunt in that also. She was my mother's younger sister. 2 acres away is what was my mom's house. Before that, it was a little white farm house, which my mother and her siblings grew up in. When I was growing up, it was Mammy's grandmother and Granddaddy's house. As a child, I spent hours playing in the dirt with my cousins. We drew houses in the sandy and sometimes muddy ground. We pretended to have dances in the mansions we drew. We had a tire swing on one of the pecan trees and a porch swing on the front porch of the house. We would swing and make up songs and listen to our voices echo off the surrounding woods. We played dolls and rode tobacco sticks as horses. We were also pestered constantly by older brothers. They were always chasing us with worms or snakes, throwing walnuts at us, or just generally making our lives full of surprises. I remember family reunions and large Sunday dinners. Everything grown and cannot be my mother's, and canned by my grandmother, aunts, or neighbors. One of my favorite desserts was my grandmother's chocolate pie. The meringue was high and the chocolate was so rich. Of course, nothing came from a can. As I grew older, I started helping in barning Granddaddy's tobacco. I never got to drive the tractor or string or hang the tie on tobacco sticks in the barn. I was a hander. I would pack down 4 or 5 leaves of tobacco so they were even at the top and hand them to whoever was stringing. The thing I hated worst was all the knowledge needed for my brother, cousin, or anyone else to get me to squeal and run. One of my favorite things around age 12 was the cute boys who were hired to help. Then, of course, there was the morning break. My granddaddy would bring in drinks, colas, orange drinks, grape drinks, Dr. Pepper, those kinds of drinks. And, of course, moon pies, peanuts, and nabs, peanut butter crackers. What a feast and great junk food. We played and laughed, and I knew just what it was to have a family who worked together, played together, prayed together, and knew we always had each other. There was one time that my cousin and I thought we would get away with sneaking into our brother's treehouse, more like a board balanced in a tree. We made it up there. What we didn't realize was it was in the same pasture as Granddaddy's bull. There he was, and there we were, stuck. After a great deal of time and worry, my granddaddy showed up. He wanted to know just what we were doing in that tree. He took the bull away, and we were saved. I almost believe my brother and cousin planned that just for us. My granddaddy, who also grew cotton, we played for a long time on the bales until we were chased away for pulling them apart. I also remember that on rainy days, we played in the many hiding places and small rooms in Mammy's house. We hid in closets and under beds in the back bedrooms. No one went into those rooms much. Everything was always neat and tidy. We found my grandmother's hats and dresses she wore on Sunday. Of course, that made for dressing up and tea parties. As my mind wandered back to the present, I am so thankful for fond memories on this farm. Although there are no cotton fields and the pecan trees need tending to, I can still picture all as it was. The road that now has a name was called the Dirt Road. We always would get so excited when we came to visit because we could see the town. We excited when we came to visit because we could see the turn off to the dirt road, a road that opened a world of wonder and imagination in a time when that was what kids longed for. The games like Ring Around the Rosie, Red Rover, Tag, Swing the Statue. The best was who would take the dare to touch the electric fence. Guess who got knocked down more than once from the shock of one touch. I wanted, of course, by my sweet older brother. Freedom Road, as it was now called, has many cars and trucks and vans which speed by. On lazy Sundays or evenings as a girl, we would sit and count how many cars or tractors might come by. If we were lucky, maybe there would be 10 or so. Now the traffic is nonstop. There is even a housing development down the road. There used to be only farmland and a scattering of barns and houses. Most of the people who passed by my grandparents' home were known by them. They were families going to or from visits with family or friends. Some of them returning from the end of church family gathering, the kind that lasted all afternoon, with homemade food spread on long tables. The children were left to run and play everywhere around the churchyard grounds and buildings, left to enjoy being children. The younger women with small children talked and rocked each other's babies and kept eyes on each other's toddlers. The older women gathered to talk of all that was going on in the community, the births, deaths, illness, their families, and who needed help of any kind. The men, most were farmers, talked of crops and weather and were to find help with gathering crops. The teenagers gathered to joke, laugh, and find out who liked who or who to stay away from. There was no schedule or computers or cell phones, only old-fashioned communication, interest and caring for one another, Now on Freedom Road, there are many unknown families. However, my cousin, the one who was a pest while I was growing up, still seems to know most of what's going on around here. I sometimes feel he is a clone of my grandfather's. He works hard and long hours and would give you or anyone his last dollar if they needed it. He is available to help anyone and has been my friend and very much like a protective older brother. He and his wife raised their children to know the importance of family and being available to each other. His sisters and their families live on the same land that was connected to my grandparents, 160 acres. His father also still lives in the same house where I spent lots of time. His sister and I spent many hours back and forth from their home to my grandparents' home. They were a few acres away. A tobacco barn and field was between them. There was a large walnut tree by the barn. That's where our brothers hid to throw walnuts at us. I dearly treasure him as a friend and a cousin and respect him as a man of honor. He always has a smile, a joke, and a kind word, no matter how tired he may be. I remember my granddaddy being the same way. Granddaddy went every evening after supper to the little country store, the old-fashioned kind that had just a little of everything. He went together with other farmers, and catch up on all the news. Occasionally, Mammy might have needed something. We were always awaiting his arrival back home because he never forgot to bring a bag of penny candy. When I was very young, I also remember the old kitchen. It was on the back part of the house. Granddaddy would sit there every morning and sip his coffee from a saucer. Mammy would put a saucer and cup together so nicely. I'm not sure there were any mugs in those days. He would pour the coffee into the saucer from the cup and sip away. I always found it interesting. Around that time, there was a hen house not far from the kitchen. Mammy would ask me to get the eggs. Now, that was not one of my favorite things to do, mainly because there was the meanest rooster ever created just waiting. He loved to squeak, squawk, and fly at me. He was going to own the whole yard, and I was glad to let him do it. Only I also always did what Mammy asked. Then there were the chickens who weren't so sure about getting off the eggs, and they don't wash the eggs before they lay them. Know what I mean? All in all, it was an adventure. And brown eggs are always better than white ones. That's what I was told anyhow. I always followed through just as fast as possible. I'm sure I dropped a few, but cereal wasn't the staple for breakfast. Mammy's bacon, eggs, and grits were hot and always there in the morning. It filled the kitchen with warmth, not only from the heat of the old stove, but from the love which surrounded the whole house. She could also whip up a pan of homemade biscuits faster than Hardee's. Sometimes she would melt cheese on them. I also learned to eat tomatoes with sugar and margarine. My granddaddy loved them. It's one thing that didn't stay with me forever. My system sort of got sensitive to such things when I was older. I also vaguely remember getting warm by the black wood burning stove. It never was not burning wood. Granddaddy kept it stocked and going. It was sort of in the center of the house. There were two fireplaces. One in my grandparents' bedroom that connected to another one in the next bedroom. That's why the two back bedrooms were empty of people, especially in the fall and winter of the year. Although they had to be used when my mom's family were growing up and, of course, on visits. Then there were piles of homemade quilts and heavy white bedspreads. The best fun was when all the cousins would stay and we would sleep on the floor. No sleeping bags or blow-up mattresses, just a pallet made from many quilts laid on the living room floor near the pot-belly stove. We laughed and slept very little, but that's what being together was for. My head comes back to the present. It is a little after 6 in the morning. This is one of the best times to be on the porch. The still and the quiet serenity is breathtaking. The slight breeze refreshing. The sounds of many kinds of birds fill the silence. There are crows and sparrows, and both white hawks, and many I don't know. Always in the distance there is the crowing of a rooster and the coo of the doves. God's creatures are peaceful and fill me with a sense of appreciation for the world that surrounds me here. The smell of fresh air and the land that has been a part of my heritage is my comfort. My cousin just drove by in his pickup. Across the lawn in front of the porch, he is checking on his crop and off to feed the cows. They stay in the back field, which has a creek. From the morning, I would say they are happy to see him. Thinking of cows, I am reminded of something my uncle told me about my granddaddy. He raised pigs and cows. The calves he purchased were and raised by hand. He would never eat the beef after they were slaughtered. I guess he became very attached to them and could not get their big brown eyes out of his head. He also had a dog which followed him everywhere. I'm not sure where the dog came from or what happened to him. I was very young then. I do remember that as soon as Granddaddy headed for his old blue pickup, the dog was in the back waiting. I can only recall being with Granddaddy one time in his pickup. I can recall the fetching of adventure and peace and not really caring where we were going. I was with a man I looked up to and left and felt safe with. Guess that must have been just how his dog felt. Feeling of serenity coming from people or animals are always reassuring. I can see the back of the home place from my porch. There is a small yellow shed there now. I recall an as 3-section shed which had a place for storage and the power box for the electric fence. The middle section was for parking the tractor or pickup, I think. It had old parts of things that seemed to go to something mechanical. Then there was the third section, the only one which had a floor, a step, a window, and a door. Long before I was around, it was the room my mom stayed in with a lady relative. The story was she had no other place to stay, so Mammy and Granddaddy took care of her. My mom slept out in the room with her every night. I only remember all the old stuff my cousin and I found to help furnish our houses we drew in the dirt. I also remember helping Mammy hang out fresh washed laundry in the bright sun. That was behind the first section of the shed. Beyond that, there were apple trees and peach trees, and the air was fresh and crisp. I loved the sun on my face and my grandmother at my side. I've heard lots of stories of my mom and aunts and uncles growing up here. They moved here after the house they lived in burned down. The main thing was that they were all safe. What you doing? Granddaddy got the land from his uncle when my mother was very young. The original land was a large plantation long ago, which had been divided and sold off as years went by. It was farmed by slaves, the Old South. Before it was a plantation, it was owned by Indians. It was an armory where they made weapons and traded with others from all around. They lived and farmed and grew generations of families, just as my family has. When the fields are freshly plowed for planting, many arrowheads and various items they used for cooking or preparing meals, such as a bowl made from stone, have been found. I'm sure there was a burial ground. There was a stream that has been dried up, that many unusable arrowheads have been found. I've been told that was where they worked on making the items they used. What a rich history. My brother has some of the arrowheads he has had analyzed. One of them is at least 2,000 years old. He was told it came from a different tribe than was there. It indicates that travel and trading that went on. My grandparents had 7 children. One winter, they all were ill with the flu. In those days, it was a lot more dangerous. There wasn't all the modern medicine and convenience of hospitals, tests, and doctors. Mammy cared for all her children in her home. I can only imagine the work and prayers she went through. Unfortunately, the baby did not make it through that illness. To bury a child so young, I'm sure, was heartbreaking. My mom remembers what a beautiful baby he was. He is buried at the family church grounds along with other relatives. I didn't know. I think in that same year, my mom got polio. I know that she had surgery on her foot or ankle in the home. My aunt, her younger sister, talks about pulling her around in a quilt all over the yard. What a devoted sister. They continued being very close even after my mom passed away in her 70s. I see and feel that some closeness with my aunt, that same closeness with my aunt. The qualities in her, which I'm sure were passed down from my grandmother, are the same. There is a strength and love of family that I was given. the ability to deal with life and continue to always make the best of things. The laughter comes easily and the tears are shared as well. I've been told I have an ability to come back from bad situations and put them behind me, to go on and enjoy all the good that is around me. That came from my heritage and the shared time I have sitting on the front porch. Mammy was a godly woman. She had a quiet faith that she lived every day. When we stayed with her, we went to church and Sunday school, Bible school in the summer, and prayer meetings on Wednesday nights. It instilled in me a love of the Lord and always a peace to hang on to. There were times I strayed away, but those roots don't get pulled out. God has always brought me back to prayer and water and grow. I was taught His forgiveness and love never ceases. I know that to be true because He has always waited for me and welcomed me with open arms. When my mom met my dad, I think they were early teens. They met at a county dance. The line my dad used has been told to us many times. He looked at her and said, "I want my mama to buy me a baby doll who looks just like you, original and very effective." They got married when they were 19. My dad had served in the Navy at 17 because his mom allowed him to by signing papers. He said he spent his 18th birthday in a cave in Japan. He served at the end of World War II. Their love was strong and their hearts were joined as one. Even being apart from each other they continued a very caring and loving relationship. I remember spending summers on my grandparents' farm. It showed me that families were always there, no matter how long we had to live in different places. Our family roots and caring about them always grew stronger. My dad also served in the Korean conflict and Vietnam. He was very proud to serve our country. He expressed to his children and family that we should be proud of where we came from, and it is important to be patriotic. We were moved to many places. My parents raised us to be strong people and to always work on getting positive attitudes. We were shown by the way my parents worked together to keep our family close and to depend on each other down on the farm. What do you think? Should I make a book?
That was amazing.
Really? You think so?
Mother, I love you so much.
Oh, honey.
Happy Mother's Day. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too, baby.